prolonged success of any martial art, including internal martial arts like Tai Chi, when they work, are usually due to the fact that somebody, somewhere along the way, figured out what martial arts are all about, and boiled it all down to core principles, and figured out the quality that must be achieved in order to achieve reliable success. Of course, we know about the Tai Chi concept of yin and yang, the fundamental duality which defines the phenomenal universe. But in a more practical martial art context, it comes down to a thing that so many Tai Chi students think that they understand but don't. It's a thing that is so crucially important to all martial arts that hardly anybody talks about it. What internal martial arts seem to do, in my observation, is treat conflict as an engineering problem. While external martial arts argue about whether the glass is half full or half empty, internal stylists see the glass as sometimes being twice as big as it needs to be. So you're not just looking at things from one point of view, you're seeing how you can modify the vehicle itself in order to contain the internal and external forces. Beginners tend to see fighting in terms of absolutes, but as we improve, we learn that it is actually about ratios. We can manage stress with less strain if we understand the collective modulus of the body and the mind. Now, I am not an engineer. My formal education is limited to the Canadian public school system, so you can expect me to mix physics with metaphor in a way that will make keyboard warriors twitch and make science educators roll their eyes. So bear with me. Like any good martial arts student, I invite you to assume the responsibility for figuring out what the true understanding that is buried within my steaming pile of ignorance. So, okay, here we go. For this video, I want to start by dispensing with some Chinese words like qi and pung and liu. They'll come up again later in other videos, but I want to explain why I'm not going to use them today. I try not to talk about qi because it means too many things to too many people. Chinese speakers get confused by it, so you can imagine how confusing it is in translation. Qi has been used to describe air and breath and gas and flatulence, electricity, fascia, characteristics of blood and lymph, proprioception, and the inherent qualities of all manner of things. A rock has rock qi. A tree has tree qi. A human being has human qi. A dead thing has dead qi. So I try to find another word for it whenever possible. If someone asks me what qi is, I am tempted to reply, qi is a bugger of a word. Keep it away from me. But I do sometimes say qi when I'm talking about that electrical feeling that courses through the 14 vessels when I'm doing Taoist Neigong practice, or Qigong. It feels to me like electrical wires conducting electricity through the acupuncture channels. I can feel the points, and I have sensations of defining the channels almost exactly like they appear in many acupuncture textbooks. There's some differences here and there. But that is anecdotal. It's not a scientific explanation of anything. We do not need to talk about it here, especially when there is so much more precise terminology that we can draw upon. 100,000 words in English. We should be able to find some that work. Of course, I also sometimes say qi when I'm with a group of people and we're getting our picture taken. Qi. Another couple of words I want to do away with today, although they are relevant to today's topic, are pung and liu. Pung is the most important concept in martial arts in general, but especially in Tai Chi. The word itself is specific to Tai Chi. But it is understood in some form or another by advanced martial artists of all styles. It is not very well understood by beginners, however, for a few very good reasons. Beginners are too preoccupied with learning techniques and developing skills to be bothered with anything as crucially important as the fundamental nature of martial arts. And also, Pung is not simply a combination of techniques. It is not even a simple quality. It's actually sort of an amalgamation of different qualities. It cannot be properly explained without including a group of important principles of physics, engineering, psychology, and strategy. The terminology used to describe it seems to be specifically designed to confuse people. The word itself is not historically found in many dictionaries, and it's often confused with homophones like Pung and Pung and Pung and even Pung. So when I introduce Pung and Lü to beginners, I sometimes say that Pung is like water supporting a log. That's a classical definition. And Lü is the ease with which the log can be made to drift or roll over. Pung involves many things, but it involves the very precise and high tensile modulus of elasticity and a very low or non-existent shear modulus. Another reason that Pung is not really well understood is that when Tai Chi teachers talk about Pung, they seem to do it in such a way that makes the students want to accept the simplest explanation and be done with it. They attach themselves to the first understanding of it and then resist exploring it more deeply themselves. Sometimes the teacher might be hiding the fact that they don't really understand it themselves, but it could also be their way of keeping the knowledge secret from those who don't have the personality or intelligence to look deeper, or who lack the capability to see past their own preconceptions. It's like a test to see who can recognize the Dunning-Kruger effect in themselves. So you see, by now, many people will have already stopped watching this video. So I can safely continue the explanation to those of you who remain, now that the riffraff have tuned out and gone back to their cat videos. Okay, now let's leave all those words alone for a while and see if we can engineer a martial art from scratch, shall we? Let's try thinking of self-defense in the broadest terms as the management of stress, strain, plasticity, and elasticity. If you remember from your science class, stress is all of the stuff that happens, and strain is the effect that it has. Usually in engineering you're talking about a specific material, but in this context we're going to be more general, and somewhat metaphorical. Because we're not just talking about a material, we're talking about a whole bunch of combinations of materials, how they're put together, how they change and adapt to each other, and we're also talking about the relationship with the mind and the body. So stress is all the stuff that happens in the world, and strain is how it affects you. So, an example. In most places in Canada, in the wintertime, the temperatures usually get down to minus 40 degrees or lower at least once or twice a year. And sometimes they get to minus 60 in some places. Now, if you want to know how cold that is, minus 60, I think, is the point where oil no longer flows. So cars just stop running. Don't bother asking if that's Fahrenheit or Celsius, because at that point they both agree that cold is cold. The cold weather is stress. How cold it makes you is the strain. How much you can adjust to being cold is your plasticity. Most humans don't do well outside of their optimal body temperature, but how much you recover from hypothermia without losing ears, fingers, toes, or organ function, that is your elasticity. If you stay indoors or wear warm clothing, you are reducing the stress. You are improving the temperature around you. So you're reducing the amount of stress that the cold causes by getting rid of the cold. If you condition yourself against the cold, that reduces the strain. So for example, if you were to move from Cuba to the Arctic in October, you might complain about temperatures being minus 20 degrees Celsius. But in November, the temperature drops to minus 50, and you begin to look forward to it being minus 20 again. And by March, minus 20 degrees is chopping wood in a t-shirt and shorts weather. The minus 20 degrees is the same stress, but it no longer causes you any strain because you have learned what warm-blooded really means. Another example, if someone nags you all the time, that is stressful. If you wear earplugs, that may reduce your stress, but learning to listen and engage wisely can reduce the strain. Yes, dear? Yes. Another example, if someone punches you in the stomach, that is stress. Getting the wind knocked out of you by that punch is the strain. Deflecting or dodging the punch reduces the stress. Developing iron body and abs of steel, that reduces the strain. If someone applies a throw, like let's say what they call in judo an ouchigari, I think it's called an ouchigari. So yeah, get in there and you hook the leg and push the person over. That is stress. The technique itself is stress. You falling down, that is strain, because you have been displaced and deformed. So you falling down is strain. The technique, ouchigari, that is stress. If you move your leg, that reduces the stress and you don't get thrown down. So you don't experience the strain. If they follow up with osotogari, so they go over the outside of the leg and they slam you to the ground, then you experience the strain again. But you do a perfect break fall and roll back to your feet, showing that you can tolerate that much strain. That is plasticity. So you do experience the strain caused by the stress, but you roll out of it and you're back on your feet and you adapt. So that's the plasticity that we're talking about. The force had an effect on you, it displaced your body, changed your body's shape, and disrupted your balance, but you adapted and reorganized yourself as if nothing had happened. Plasticity is your ability to reorganize in response to a changing situation. If the opponent does ouchigari and as you fall, they land their knee on your groin and their head goes into your nose and their finger goes into your eye, well, those are different kinds of stresses, and you might not be able to tolerate that much stress or adapt to the strain as quickly. So they are not only complicating the stress, they are reducing your ability to adapt. They are affecting your plasticity. In Tai Chi, we do a lot of push-hands. So if somebody pushes you, that is stress. If you get moved off balance and fall down or stumble into a fist or a throw, that is strain. If you get moved and you're fine with that, that is plasticity. So just because they move you, it doesn't mean they've won the fight. You're still connected to the ground the same way you were before. So now, if somebody pushes you and you do not move because you have superior structure and you don't bend, you don't bruise, you don't break, then there is little or no strain. That means that there is a high ratio of stress to strain. The push is powerful, but it doesn't affect you. In the engineering metaphor, you will have displayed a high modulus of elasticity. If someone applies an S-bend lock to your wrist, that is stress. If you feel pain or you are driven to your knees, that is strain. If the pain doesn't bother you, or being driven to your knees works for you, then that is plasticity. If you neutralize the lock by moving at right angles to the pressure, then that reduces the stress. If you redirect the forces through your own body in a way that eliminates the pain and the pliability, that reduces the strain and allows you to use the opponent's force against them. Now, as a martial artist, you must consider a bunch of different qualities and characteristics. So you must consider the stress, which is the force that you encounter. You have to consider the strain, which is the effect that the force has on you. And you have to consider the plasticity, which is your ability to reorganize after you are affected by the force. And also the elasticity, which is the amount of force that you can resist and or recover from. Another thing to consider is the relationship between the different types of elastic modulus. This is where it gets tricky. See, Tai Chi tries to isolate the linear qualities defined by Young's modulus while minimizing the shear modulus and compensating for the way that bulk really complicates the things with nonlinear relationships between the different parts of the body. So, fortunately, by relaxing the body and calming the mind, and by allowing the point of contact to constantly change and maintaining the really precise vector that where we calculate the Young's modulus, and by engaging our internal Heisenberg compensators, we can allow for the fact that Young's modulus only applies to limited forces and static loads, and we can make the principle functional in a changing kinetic exchange, like a person throwing combinations of punches, kicks, pushes, traps, locks, throws, and insults, and pushing us in more than one direction at a time, or trying to push us in more than one direction at a time. So we have to be able to manipulate the way that they are able to push us, not just how we are responding to the push. So in engineering a martial art, you will want to be able to do the following things. You want to be able to modify the amount of stress that is applied. And this doesn't just mean the force that they apply to you, but the force that you apply to them. I'll point out that it's really only beginners that see offense and defense as different things. As you get better, you realize that force is force and stress is stress. Newton's third law of motion tells us that there is no mechanical difference between attack and defense. This means that you can look at affecting your relationship with your opponent in a way that lets you change the amount of force that they apply against you. You also want to be able to modify the amount of strain that is experienced by regulating the collective elastic modulus of the body and mind. Metaphor alert. Okay, yeah. You want to be able to change how a push or a punch affects you. Does it bounce off? Does it get absorbed? Does it get deflected? And the third thing you want to consider is that you have to improve and understand your plasticity. How much can you be pushed around? How much can you be hurt, thrown, punched, displaced, deformed without losing? How do you define losing? How can you change that definition when you need to? So, how flexible is your body? How flexible is your mind? How flexible are your emotions? How flexible is your pain threshold? How much are you willing to change your strategy, tactics, ego, and your definition of victory? Remember that retreat and surrender are valid strategic options and even tactical decisions. Remember the Ferengi rule of acquisition number 76. Every once in a while, declare peace. It confuses the hell out of your enemy. The fourth thing you want to be able to do is improve and understand your elasticity. Remember, elasticity is not about being stretchable and pliable. Elasticity is about being able to withstand and recover from force. Diamond is more elastic in this context than rubber because diamond can experience more stress without permanently changing its shape. Rubber can recover its shape after a little bit of stress, but too much force will damage its shape, change its shape, or turn it into many shapes. Tai Chi and other internal martial arts have developed some really unique approaches for developing and understanding these elements. And I'll talk about some of these in the videos that I'll be presenting in the next couple of weeks. Meanwhile, again, I want to thank everybody for your support. I appreciate your donations, your subscriptions. Please visit Sinclair Internal Arts, and if you would like to sign up for a private online lesson, you can do that at the website as well, sinclairinternal.arts.com. Thank you. Very good. More practice.